Hello and welcome to Media Musings. Now, first, in regards to that moment of silence, across the pond, or basically in every place that isn't America, this was the 11th was Remembrance Day / this is Remembrance Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
In America, that's Memorial Day, and that's in May. This is Veterans Day, where people celebrate those who have served and survived.
I'm gonna hazard a guess, May the 6th.
I I think it's in early May.
Yeah, that would kind of make sense. Um,
Um, however,
yeah,
um, uh, so the it was more and and I do have to mention this because it was a big part of my childhood. Kevin Conroy also passed away this past week. He was the voice of Batman in Batman the Animated Series.
okay, yeah. So, two very different but equally valid reasons to hold a moment of silence there, I think.
Yep.
Um, yeah, we set aside this week every year, you've probably noticed by now, and we do a war film of some description.
Yep.
And this year's has fallen smack in the middle of American Mythos Month, which means you get to be the whipping boy.
Yes.
And look, you've even dressed for the occasion.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, please, may I have another?
this is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. Blanket trigger warning. We're discussing Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
It's a World War II film based loosely around the events of D-Day.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of things we're going to say and things we're going to discuss. The movie itself, literally, if they air that movie before the watershed, they have to put it with a content warning
Yeah.
beforehand. And a
Um,
lot of times, because it runs so long, they play it at the early watershed, not the late one, so they have to put the warning. And networks have been fined for running it at 9 o'clock.
and also for those who are not familiar with Saving Private Ryan, it's a World War II movie that is very much scripted, shot, and directed as if it were a Vietnam movie.
Mm. It's also a Spielberg movie,
Yeah.
and Spielberg and war films go hand in hand.
And Spielberg and making and just obliterating you with the camera also go hand in hand.
Yes, it's also very much in the style of an epic, insofar as it has a similar structure to an epic poem. Insofar as you open in the heat of the action, and then you're introduced to the dramatic players, and you follow the plot from there. It's a very
Yeah.
simple plot. I will say for this movie, at its heart, it's a MacGuffin movie.
Yeah. Except the MacGuffin is a person.
Yeah, and then a bridge.
Yeah.
So
I well,
it is a
see,
MacGuffin movie.
no, see, I agree that Private Ryan is a MacGuffin. However, like like I can't agree. I can't, in good conscience, agree that the bridge is a MacGuffin.
Yeah, it's kind of a Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
except of course it doesn't fire.
but
Oh,
that is my analyst hat coming on as like, no, I get why the bridge is important.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I get why the bridge is important, but it can be both important strategically and a good plot device.
Yeah.
Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Oh, hi Beck. I just realised who you are. Hello. Hi
So,
Jenny.
though, if I remember right, part of the definition of a MacGuffin is it's only really useful to the plot.
Okay, but it kind of is only really useful to the plot because Deus Ex reinforcements. So what I'm thinking we should do with this, because it's a long film, folks. It's over 2.5 hours long. Bring snacks. Actually, don't bring snacks. If you bring snacks, eat them in the middle bit.
Yeah.
Because that's the relatively less gory bit.
I will say, though, it is over 2.5 hours long, or just shy of 3 hours long. It goes by really quickly.
Yeah, and it's incredibly well paced.
Yeah.
Again, kudos to Spielberg for that. What I think we should do is discuss all the trivia about this movie.
Yeah.
Then discuss the movie.
Yeah.
Because there's as much trivia as there is movie.
Yeah. One of my favorite bits is that, like, Steven put, or Spielberg put, the main cast, all the main cast through boot camp, except for Matt Damon.
Yeah, because he wanted them all to really resent Matt Damon and for that to come across on screen.
Yeah.
Very cleverly done. There's also another bit about that was really funny. They basically tried to mutiny like 3 days into the boot camp. And the basically Tom Hanks got the deciding vote, but he was enjoying the boot camp so much they had to finish it because he wouldn't vote with them. Which I just that's the kind of trivia movies are made for, folks.
Yeah. So basically, Tom Hanks was very well cast.
Incredibly well cast, yes. Yeah. I think they all were very well cast, except maybe Vin Diesel. I feel like this is in the whole movie, the one character who I didn't.
That's why I was like, I recognize that actor, but I have no idea who he is.
It's Vin Diesel. Not his best performance. He was very young at the time. I don't even think he'd made it at the time. I think this was his breakout role. Kind of similar with Matt Damon. Matt Damon was cast because he was unknown. And then another movie came out that he was in that was his breakout role while this was still in post-production. But speaking of casting...
Yeah, I will have to get this in. I see that Saving Private Ryan is not innocent of the sin of most post-90s medias that include this actor. And that is criminally underusing Bryan Cranston.
Of course.
Yeah.
Another thing on casting, the casting of older Ryan. I genuinely, the first time I watched it in it would have been about 98 when I saw it because I didn't see it in cinemas. I genuinely thought it was a CGI thing. But CGI was not that good in 98.
Yeah, it was released in 98, and I'm I know you saw incredibly violent movies earlier than you should have, but Saving
Yeah,
Private
I was
Ryan at that age.
6 years. Yeah, about
Yeah,
6 years old.
really.
Yeah, yeah. The funny thing is, I saw it at home, and then the following year in school, our teachers, when we were learning about D-Day and World War II, showed us an abridged clip of the start of this movie
Yeah.
when we were 8 years old.
Wow.
British education is just different.
British education is hardcore.
Yeah.
And of course,
Um,
hello to Native Atheist Uncle Beck and Jenny in the chat, and of course anyone who is lurking and or watching in the future.
yeah. I will say you've got the thing is though British education, also Catholic education. I'd already seen blood, guts, and torture in my life. I had to look up at it every Sunday. It's, and I'm sure we'll get on to discussing religion in this film.
Also,
I have thought.
okay, so this tells you everything about everything you need to know about our disparate upbringings. In 1998, Noodle saw Saving Private Ryan in theaters.
I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it at home, but my
Okay.
parents didn't stop me watching it.
Well, okay, you saw it shortly after it came out.
Yeah.
In 1980, like the movies I saw shortly after I actually did see them in theaters when they came out, were in 1998 were The Prince of Egypt and Tarzan.
I didn't see either of those in theaters. Wait, no. Did I see Prince of Egypt in theaters? No, I don't think I did. But I did see them both very quickly because my dad wore an eye patch and sailed the 7 seas of the internet to collect movies.
Drink up me hearties, yo ho.
Yeah. Why is that? Yeah. Anyway, and I was his tester for most of them, so I had to sit through. There was a point where if a movie came out, I saw it within 5 days of it hitting cinemas, and I didn't go to the cinema. And I saw it because I had to watch it and check how many times people stood up in front of it, or if there were words along the bottom, or if there was Russian. Just yeah. I was an apprentice. So yeah. Anyway, that for the casting. Where else are we looking? Sorry, I've got about 4 pages of multicolored notes here. So just also the little girl.
Yeah.
It's not casting, but it is a comment I just want to pass. The little girl, when she gets back to her father and starts slapping him, is such a mood.
Yeah.
She's like, she just wins this entire movie for that, like slapping at him. Like, yeah, this is a mood. Yeah.
Like I get why he did it, but it was also very, very stupid.
Oh yeah, no. I feel like that should just be the tagline for everyone who does anything in this movie.
Yeah.
I get why you did it, but it was also incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
Like even the guy who's supposed to be the leader and have brains make some really fucking questionable decisions.
But
from a strategic tactical point of view.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk tactics now, or do we want to leave that to near the end?
I mean, might as well. We're kind of getting into it already.
Cool. Right. None of these people have got any common sense. Like, I know we're talking about war and it's a horrible subject, but these characters, how did they even notice their brains were blown out? They didn't use them anyway. But yeah, first of all, and I say this knowing full well I'm married to someone who doesn't know how to put one together. Fasten your fucking helmet!
Yeah.
The number of characters in this movie, seriously, someone should make a drinking game of this movie. And top of the list is every time someone's helmet falls off their head mid-combat, drink.
Though that being said, did helmets have chin straps in World War II?
They had them in the movie. Whether they had them in World War II or not, look, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Yeah.
I did not preempt that question. I think so because they had them on Dad's army, and that used old army surplus stock from World War II. So I'm going to say yes. And the helmets were not to protect from bullets. Let's make that clear here. They were tin cans. They were not. But
yes and no.
If a brick lands on your head, it's going to do a lot less damage to a tin can than it is to your skull.
Yes and no. They wouldn't protect you from a direct shot.
But yeah, a glancing blow it might, yeah.
Yeah. Like, in fact, we do see a glancing blow protect someone and then immediately be forfeited.
Yeah. And just also in this movie, like, I'd forgotten what it was. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go frame by frame in this movie, and I'm going to get a pen, and I'm going to scribble over the 80-second patches, and I'm going to colour the entire uniforms in red. Because, oh my God.
Yeah.
I like, okay, Spielberg, we get it. War is hell. People die.
Yeah.
But wow. Like, no one is safe in this movie. Like, even the person you think is safe is not safe in this movie.
Yeah.
And spoilers for a 25-year-old movie. That was my helmet rant. I literally, I have it. I wrote the note here. Let me see if it shows up on screen. That's like your fucking helmet strap. So yes, I can erase that now. That's fine. Right. We go from helmets to bell towers.
Yeah.
I'm going to give my point of view as a historian. Then I'm going to hand over to Ring, who's going to give their point of view as a veteran.
Yeah. As an Intel analyst veteran.
As an Intel analyst, you may hear an echo. First of all, in that final montage, that final act, the bell tower of all of the buildings in that area would not have still been standing. It is basic common sense and has been common sense since we were fighting wars with bows and fucking arrows and sticks and frigging and making the Bart Simpson thingies.
Yeah, slings.
And so that's it. With rocks and slings.
Yeah.
That if you have the opportunity, which clearly the opportunity was had in this area, to level a battlefield or level an area of buildings, you do not leave the one massively strategically advantageous high point that would be perfect for a fucking sniper standing.
Yeah.
And would give you don't. Okay. It has been military strategy since going back at least 3,000 years to take out the tall buildings for the exact reason of they make a perfect sniper's nest.
Yeah.
At least from my point of view as a historian, like, I'm pretty sure it's in Sun Tzu somewhere. I'd be surprised if it's not. That really irritated me looking back on it. Obviously, I've not watched this film in years, since well before I did my degree. Captain Miller is supposed to be this high school teacher. father to his men, father figure to his men, intelligent, strategic, thinks things through, doesn't lose his head in, doesn't lose his cool.
Yeah.
The minute he hears there's a tank coming, he just goes, and the sniper goes along with it. Like the sniper should have. The minute Miller said you need to go up the bell tower, the sniper should have said no, sir, because the minute the tank comes around that corner, he's going to take one look at the bell tower and blow it down, and I'm going to be inside it. That should have been that conversation. Like, that's a conversation civilians would have. Ring takeover, please.
Now, so I'm going to disagree with you slightly.
Go on.
Going up into the bell tower was a good idea because it's, especially now going up there with a with a 40, a machine gun loaded with tracers, not so much. Probably should have had like the other guy with a bar and a and a bazooka, because they did have bazookas.
Yeah, they did. They had 9 bazookas. They were very, very low equipped. What was it? They
had like 3 bazookas and 9 rockets for them.
Yeah.
But because having the sniper up there, that's the best place to put the sniper. Yes, it's an obvious target, but
yeah, I mean,
the Germans are trying to take the bridge. They're not trying so the Americans are there to either hold or deny. The Germans are trying to retake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that using the bell tower is what you would do, but you also want to have an exit strategy and or have the backup there be able to take out tanks, since that's gonna be the main threat to the sniper.
Like, sending the sniper up there without some kind of anti-tank thing is rolling the dice on you stopping the tank before it gets in range of that bell tower. That's very unlikely, because it's a clear shot down that road.
Yeah, especially since they were going up against 4 tanks, 2 Panzers and 2 Tigers.
Yeah. And so there's only 2 reasons you put us in this specific scenario in this movie. Yeah. There's only 2 reasons the sniper goes up there. 1, he's going up there with a specific anti-tank weapon that can take out the tank that's going to turn on him. Or 2, he's already kissed his ass goodbye.
Three, he's there to be the eyes in the sky, which he was.
He was. But the thing is, that still is predicated on him dying.
Yeah.
Like, Miller was either very stupid tactically, which, I mean, it doesn't really jar with his character. He makes some mistakes.
No.
Or he'd done the calculation and decided the sniper's life was on the line here.
So here's the thing. So Miller's mission was to get Private Ryan out alive.
Yeah.
Ryan's like, I have a mission to hold this bridge with my unit. I'm not
Therefore,
leaving.
Miller's mission is the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. But I'm a civilian. I care about individual human lives.
And Miller knew that they were going to essentially end up, going down to probably going to end up going down to the last man, he called, they named their rally point the Alamo.
Yeah, so they knew they were.
Yeah.
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 I will also just. It's
So
tactically, it's a shit thing. Strategically, when you look at a broader battle, it's exactly the right move. It's just heartless. So as a civilian, I don't like that. But Miller's playing chess here, and what essentially he did, he sacrificed his knight to protect his queen.
Yeah.
Which, that's what he did. And the sniper just went along with it.
Yeah.
Now, let's be clear here. None of these guys expected to survive that battle.
Yeah.
It's made quite clear. That's why you get the little love fest of them all sharing stories of home before it.
Yeah. And also they're rangers. They're all rangers, which is just shy of special forces when it comes to
first
elite
in,
combat.
last out, usually in a body bag.
Yeah.
So I get it, but as a civilian, as a bleeding heart, woke, liberal, lefty civilian, it sticks in my craw. It sticks in my craw in the same way real life events, and I'm just going to compare it to real life for a moment, even though we don't normally do that with fiction, because I think it illuminates the point. Right at the start of the invasion of Kiev this year.
Yeah.
Kiev. Zelensky ordered a bridge destroyed.
Yeah.
On the other side of that bridge were the Russians, but were also over 2,500 civilians, mostly women and children.
Yeah.
He destroyed that bridge and left them to the mercy of the Russians. I understand from a strategic standpoint, you've got to do what you've got to do. But I'm not entirely sure I could live with myself making a call like that.
Yeah.
As a civilian.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm not in the military, because I'm too much of a bleeding heart.
Yeah.
I would actively go looking for the other alternative, and the other alternative is what? Fight them on the bridge? That doesn't work. Yeah. Zelensky rolled the dice and won because most of the civilians made it across the following day, across the rubble. Miller rolled the dice and broke even.
Yeah.
The character. The reason I use a real life example there is just to point out the kind of tactics and strategies you see in this film are all based on real life.
Yeah.
They're all the kind of strategies I can very well see being employed in the heat of battle, even planned for.
Yeah.
I think when we were watching it, I commented to Ring. I said, "This entire plan with the tanks, watch it. It's the exact same, even down to the sticky bomb. It's the exact same tactics as in Kelly's Heroes, which is a satire on the Vietnam, on the Second World War."
And I replied, yeah, there's only so many ways you can take out a tank when you're an infantry unit.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently, all of those ways include giving up your socks. Would not have flown in World War One.
Yeah.
Don't at me.
Well, I mean, they didn't really have tanks in World War One until the end.
Yes, but they did have socks because there was a serious problem with trench foot.
Yeah. Well, my point is, you wouldn't have to give up your socks to take out a tank if there's no tanks.
Yeah. But yeah,
yeah.
It's one of those things. It's very. A lot of these things that they do in this film, a lot of the decisions Miller makes.
Yeah.
He's very much flying by the seat of his pants, and he's very much, if I go, I'm going to go down swinging. That seems to be his entire life philosophy. I'm going to go down and I'm going to take some fucker with me. That's it. That's his entire end goal here.
Yeah.
Which is really jarring when you see the character who supposedly just wants to go home. You're not acting like someone who wants to go home, unless that's in a body bag.
Yeah.
You're not. Which I get it, middle of a war zone, no one's thinking straight. But yeah, there's watching it as a civilian and watching it as a non-American. I genuinely just put it down to gung ho Americans. That's what they're like.
Yeah.
Because some of the decisions he makes are just flat out like he makes all the right moves, but he makes them in such a way that is so American. It's just so American. It's so American. It's really, it's like, it's just American. I can't. There's no forethought. There's no planning. There's no planning beyond the next 3 minutes. It's like, this plan will work for 3 minutes. That's fine. We only need it to work for 2.5.
Hold on.
But then it needs to last 5 because all plans blow up the minute you introduce them to the enemy. It's just really, the guy's really gung ho. So like, there's a bit in the film where they stop in the middle of an open field and they're just chatting away in an open field, and it's like, you realise you're behind enemy lines. You're behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Why are you stood around in an open field?
Yeah.
You know, it's just odd. So there's that.
I'm sorry, but since we're on the topic of American planning,
what are you doing?
Okay, I'll zoom in, or I'll try to.
Yes, Americans don't read their manuals.
Yeah. One of the serious problems in planning against American doctrine is that Americans do not read their manuals, nor do they feel any obligations to follow their doctrine. The reason the American army does so well in wartime is that war is chaos, and the American army practices chaos on a daily basis. If we don't know what we are doing, the enemy certainly can't anticipate our future actions.
Yes, but someone should know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because holy shit. But yeah, left hand doesn't know what right hand's doing.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And it is pure chaos. And I think it's designed that way, but also it's just so American. Like, somewhere about a third of the way into this film, the chain of command in the little group just completely breaks down.
Yeah.
Like, they go from stop saluting the captain and that, and then the only blip you see for chain of command next is when Mike threatens
Yep. Hold on.
When the sergeant threatens the, I think,
situation normal, all fucked up.
Yeah, snafu. Yeah, the whole thing's just snafu from beginning to end. And there's very little by way of a chain of command. And that is brilliantly done, and I can see exactly why they did it that way.
Yeah.
But only the American army would have what appears to be 20-odd soldiers pinned down by the enemy and would not see any problem with saying the words, "Best I can rustle up for you as a corporal." Like, how do you function at that point?
Yeah.
Like, your corporal's what, 2 years? You're lucky if he's got 2 years active service under his belt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hit the equivalent of corporal yeah, like just like a year and a half in. But to be fair, I did go in as an E2 instead of an E1.
Yeah, you went in as an E2. And so you were already one up. You were already one
Yeah.
ahead. So yeah. I mean, at that point, I'm not surprised the chain of command broke down.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to listen to some snotty kid who's like thinks he knows something about something, and
Yeah.
you know, what he knows is a 6-week course in America before they put him on a plane. Just nah.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting point about, while we're talking about tactics, I have opinions about Upham. I have strong opinions about Upham.
Yeah.
Upham is the closest we get to a civilian avatar in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, all these people who think they would be the heroes, no, you'd be Upham. You'd be the guy who cracked in the middle of the war zone, who the enemy walked past because it wasn't worth wasting the ammo to kill you. Because you would have completely shit the bed.
Yeah.
Because Upham should never have been put in that position.
Yeah.
Now, there was major debates when this movie first came out of, is he a coward, or is, no, he's the only person who responds like a normal human being.
Yeah.
He responds with empathy, he responds with sympathy, he responds with fear. And he feels, and he seems to be the only one who does. The rest of them are just lights are on but no one's home. Like, you get flashes of it, but you can clearly tell that they're open. There's no.
Well, as typical of the war is hell subgenre, Upham hasn't been touched by the war, hasn't been jaded by the war. He has been in the rear with the gear the entire time, making maps and translating. Yeah,
he's a translator. The man's idea of carrying his kit around is to put a pencil behind his ear.
Yeah.
Man brought a typewriter to a war zone. Tells you everything you need to know about.
I mean, the typewriter was probably issued to him.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
He thought he could take it.
Yeah.
And he's a kid. He is a kid. And talking about him and his response brings me on to, I want to touch on the reception of this film.
Okay.
This film, if you haven't gathered, is traumatic as fuck.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a mild statement relative to what it actually is. This film, in 1998, when it hit cinemas, don't forget, this is pre-9/11.
Yeah.
Your most recent veterans are going to be Desert Storm, and that was like a 3-day trip to the beach.
Yeah.
In America, you're going to have Vietnam veterans. In Britain, we've got British Army who've been fighting the IRA, but that's on Irish soil. That's not half a world away. This film was released into a time period. We're so saturated by war and images of violence now on the news and everything else. This film doesn't hit as hard as it hit when it came out.
Yeah.
And it hits hard now. Like, I am not saying this film's not hard hitting, because it is.
Yeah.
But it was we just weren't, in 1998, you didn't turn on the TV and the headline was 6 local boys killed in IED in Iraq. Or, WikiLeaks or everything we've had since then.
Yeah.
We weren't inoculated against this shit. And I think that showed. And I think it showed because a lot of people, there were reports of people walking out of the cinema to go have a cigarette after about 10 minutes because they couldn't hack the scene.
Yeah.
The D-Day landing itself, there are multiple reports of Vietnam and some World War II veterans being triggered into flashbacks watching it, to the extent that the Department for Veterans Affairs in America set up an 800 line, which I assume is like a free phone number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Arrow 800 here in the UK. For people who had been triggered by this movie. And in the first 2 weeks of this movie being out in cinemas, it got 170 calls.
Yeah.
That's more than 10 a day. And that's if every day. That's a lot. For a culture it was released into where we weren't, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was even thought to be required at all is really fucking telling. And it came out in that time of, I think the next big movie that came out after it was probably Titanic. Maybe Titanic came out just before it.
Hold on.
I feel like Titanic was 97, this was 98, and then Gladiator in 2001. But like the big movies, Avatar in 04. You know, like the big blockbuster movies.
Titanic was 97.
Yeah, Titanic's 97. So that's the culture we're talking. We're talking about a culture where Friends is on the TV every day. We're not. Yeah. You know, this is. What?
My mind just went to the beach scene, and so no one told you life was gonna be this way.
Actually, yeah, my brain literally, those words came out of my mouth. My brain processed them, and I immediately got a flash image of like all the guys in the little crew. Yeah. Like scenes from the movie recreating the Friends opening titles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that happened. Yeah. But I need to really hammer home to our audience, because I've already told you this and made you feel old.
Yeah.
This movie is so old, it was released on Laserdisc.
Yeah.
Like DVD versus Laserdisc was still an ongoing battle when this movie was released. That's how far back we're going. Like in 1998, I think my computer had a floppy drive. Which, wow. Yeah. That makes me feel old immediately, because I remember this movie being like new. But what I'm trying to get at is it's a really different culture. And it was a culture I would be reasonably... Okay, what I'm about to say is a nuanced discussion. But in 1998, yes, America had Vietnam syndrome. But America was starting to believe it had got over Vietnam syndrome because they'd had one Desert Storm like it were a piss in the park. So this film, it knocked us all off the proverbial. It blindsided us, this film, because it was a time of relative peace and had been relatively peaceful. Like we're talking 60 years after the Second World War.
Yeah, like when it came to, the Best Picture running for that year, we had, Saving Private Ryan was in the running, and Life is Beautiful, which is a Holocaust movie, and The Thin Red Line, but we also had Elizabeth and Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, Shakespeare in Love won it that year because of Hollywood politics.
Yeah.
Do you know the story behind that?
No.
Epstein lobbied for Shakespeare in Love to win.
Ooh.
And that sentence hasn't aged well.
Yeah, especially considering Harvey Weinstein was involved in the production.
Oh yeah, sorry, Weinstein, not Epstein.
Yeah.
Sorry, my mistake. I'm always mixing the two up. Right. So there's that. We were talking about, okay, what I do want to say though, this film blindsided us, but do you know what? If you want to give someone an understanding of how PTSD affects people in the moment,
Yep.
you'll not get a much, like, I would still be, having studied PTSD quite extensively for my own reasons.
Yeah.
It's right. Like, all the symptom clusters are there. Like psychosomatic symptoms of the hand shaking, the vomiting, the way they close themselves off, the emotional highs and lows, the inability to sleep or sleeping too much. It's all there. And it's really well done because all of these guys are traumatized. Don't doubt that. They're all traumatized.
Oh, yeah.
But it shows how they're all responding differently. Yeah. And yet each and every one of them still is a poster boy for PTSD.
Yeah.
Which, talking about, because we've been talking about the Saving Private Europe and the American Mythos.
Yeah.
I need you to understand what a massive leap forward an accurate depiction of PTSD in a war movie was. And I don't mean an accurate depiction as in the symptoms. I mean the fact that these guys had to carry on anyway. The fact that there was no medical discharge. It was only after the Vietnam War that PTSD was codified, and that was a long battle. That was over a decade. Because people didn't want to admit it. They didn't want, it was a political diagnosis. For a long, long time, it was a political diagnosis. Still is if you're a veteran to some extent. There's politics at play there. And so for this to come out in the late 90s, it's one thing. It would be one thing for a psychiatrist to sit down and say, this is what PTSD is and this is how it can present in 1998. But for a blockbuster Spielberg movie to do it, if people think that the way those guys behaved is an accurate representation of what PTSD is, granted that it's within a fictional framework, they're not that far wrong. The PTSD is played down a little bit because you can't have guys having flashbacks and rages and other things in the middle of a war zone. But all the beats are there. And it's just, we talk about how fiction doesn't affect reality.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But audiences, as we realised when we discussed Hamilton last week, audiences do take lessons from media. Particularly media that claims to be about history and based on true stories. And if they're taking that as a lesson on what PTSD is, that's a good. They could do a lot worse.
And I mean, like we should probably should have discussed it last week. Considering we were talking in circles around the topic the entire stream, but we didn't have to. We didn't have time, and I didn't realize we were talking in circles around the topic until later, so we're probably going to have to put a pin in it for the end of month discussion if it happens.
Have you preempted what I've been planning to discuss at the end in the discussion? I think you may have.
Like, America has a real problem with mythic literalism.
Yes. And let's put a pin in that because that's definitely something to discuss in the discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah. The PTSD, as I said, excellent. Related to that, if you ever read or if you ever get a chance to see the stage play of Band of Brothers, strongly recommend. It's kind of it's ironic because Uppen's writing a book about the bonds forged between men in war zones, and Spielberg goes on to direct the miniseries Band of Brothers.
Oh yeah, and Band of Brothers is like so most units have a cult following around some piece of media. Mm-hmm. That's it for the 101st Band of Brothers.
Like, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Like I can't tell you how many times I've got, why the fuck haven't you seen Band of Brothers?
I would have thought that would have been required viewing at basic for you. If not basic, then at least AIT once they knew what unit you were in.
Yeah.
So there's that. We were discussing. Right. No. Everything else I want to discuss largely. There is one thing I want to say that's just a humorous comment.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I was in the 101st in GWAT in Afghanistan. So coincidences.
Yeah. Coincidences. Yeah. Yep. That tracks.
Yeah.
that tracks.
Yeah. I made PowerPoints for officers in a basement.
Yeah.
I was with division headquarters and I was intel. So.
Yeah, but you weren't allowed to use the word offensive in case the top brass got twitchy.
Yeah.
So don't.
Oh yeah, we were literally not allowed to use the word offensive because it reminded the top brass of the Tet. Yeah.
That comment made.
Yeah.
Because I have opinions on the army and you don't want to hear them because the Rings heard them.
Well, more like we don't want them out in the open because we're waiting on paperwork.
It's everything you imagine I would think of the army. Turned up to 11 because my spouse was actually in the army. And we'll leave it at that for now. Just one thing about this movie that's so American.
Yeah.
Why were Matt Damon's teeth so white? I swear, in that scene when he sat on the doorstep talking about his brothers, I got so distracted by his pearly whites. I couldn't.
So
they all have the what?
So okay.
He looks like he's had them whitened. Like Richard Hammond called him after that scene for a phone number for his dentist.
So that's a good lead in to a point I want to make.
Yes.
So largely this movie is a subversion of the America was the shining hero come in to save Europe in World War II myth. largely, but it still maintains vestiges of that with, Matt Damon being so ridiculously clean cut for someone who's been in country for like a week.
Yeah.
Um,
At least 2 weeks, because he'd have been airdropped beforehand, so probably about 2 weeks.
yeah. Well, the airdrops were like the night before.
Okay, yeah, so 8 days, because
Yeah.
the day they go down at the bridge is the 13th, and they landed on the 6th, so
Yeah.
it's day 7.
Yeah.
Wait, no, it's day 7.
Yeah. Yeah. The 101st was airdropped like either the day before or the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And now that being said, in most other World War II, movies, unless it's a satire like Kelly's Heroes, the American GIs are paragons of virtue there to save, Europe from the evil Nazis. Here we actually see most of the main characters commit at least one war crime. Usually shooting prisoners of war.
Okay. I have opinions.
Yeah.
Right at the start.
Yeah.
The two soldiers who are trying to surrender.
Yeah.
And they blow them away right at the start.
Yeah.
You know those 2 guys weren't German.
Oh, really?
They're Czech. And what they're saying is, I surrender, don't shoot, I've been forced to fight. That's what they're saying in Czech. And then the 2 Americans blow them away.
Yeah.
And laugh about it. Which, look, I'm all for gallows humour in a difficult situation, but if you can kill someone that close, especially that close range, you can kill someone and then laugh about it. You don't so much as need to, like, that goes beyond being traumatized. That's malicious, and again, as a civilian, me not like it.
Yeah.
I get it. You do what you got to do to cope and survive. The scene where they talk about Vecchio to have a giggle because they're grieving. Get it?
Yeah.
But laughing about killing someone, that crosses a line for me. The movie's, Jenny makes a good point. The movie's not intended to be perfectly realistic.
Yeah.
There are a few. Look, I'm not going to sit here and niggle at all the historical inaccuracies in this movie.
Yeah.
A, because you can count them on one hand, and B, because none of them are relevant to the plot. None of them are relevant. The closest historical inaccuracy I can find that's relevant to this plot is that the German tanks would have had a glass thing over it so you couldn't throw a Molotov cocktail into them from above. That's nonsense. But other than that, it's the weird stuff, like the plane at the end was wrong, or it's they cocked the gun wrong or something stupid, or the uniforms were slightly wrong. But what are you going to do?
But I'm making a point of saying that we see, just about every major, every cast member, well, except for Matt Damon, committing a war crime, to make a point that this is a subversion of the World War II was the good war myth.
We're not here to do the decent thing. We're here to follow fucking orders.
Yes.
And I had that written down as well, so I can put that off now. You led me to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is why I'm a historian. I know a lot about war. I went through that phase of being obsessed with the Second World War like most teenagers.
Yeah.
I get a nasty taste in my mouth when I watch war films because
Yeah.
war. Okay, there's something this film does, and because we're talking about how this film sort of mythologizes and or doesn't mythologize the Second World War, there's something this film does. It's it strongly implies that the American soldiers on D-Day and the soldiers in general on D-Day knew about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Knew that because you've got the Jewish guy who taunts the German prisoners.
Yeah.
And that's played once it's in there just enough to make you think they knew what they were fighting for and they were fighting a good fight. They knew something was going on.
Yeah.
They did not know the extent of it. They did not, and I cannot stress this enough, there is not a country that got involved in the war against Hitler who did it purely to stop the Holocaust. Or
Yeah.
even the Holocaust was honestly, most of the countries, and please no one ever take out of context what I'm about to say, but for most of the countries fighting the war on both sides, the Holocaust wasn't even a consideration and they probably agreed with it.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism in Europe had been building up for a good best part of 900 years at least since the fall of the Roman Empire, depending on when you count the fall of the Roman Empire, at least since the sacking of the Temple of Jerusalem, which was in the 1st century
Now,
under the Roman Empire. So, you know,
I
don't
will.
don't fall for that. That's a bit of propaganda that happens a lot.
Now,
America and France tries to say, "Oh, we were fighting to save Jews." You weren't. We
yeah.
were fighting because we didn't want Hitler on our doorstep.
Now, I will make a slight disagreement with your point because while while most of the powers didn't care, we do have a lot of anecdotal evidence that Jewish enlisted people in
Oh yeah,
so I could
Jewish
definitely
enlisted
see
people would have known and cared, but the
like
rest of them not so much.
like we have a lot of anecdotal evidence of Jewish people enlisting just to fight the Nazis.
And I will point out the Frank family, as in Anne Frank, applied for refugee status to America and were declined before the war kicked off.
Yeah.
They tried to get out. They tried to go to America and they were denied.
Yeah.
And they're not the only ones.
But, my
Again,
point is the
there's a
Jewish
reason.
soldier,
Yeah.
would
There's a reason
definitely would have done that.
Yeah, no, but there is a reason all the Jews in Poland, Germany, France, there's a reason they didn't try and get to England or to America. And it's not because there was a bit of ocean in the way. It's because they weren't welcome and they knew it.
Yeah.
So yeah. That's why most of them went to Switzerland or went east. But yeah. Because that guy's story is really, first of all, Hitler Youth knives are about this big. They're a camping knife.
Yeah.
So when he later gets stabbed with a knife and is this big, not a Hitler Youth knife.
Yeah,
It's more like a bayonet knife.
Yeah, that was no, he was stabbed with his own bayonet.
Yeah. And we will discuss that scene in more depth because there's things to discuss there. But yeah. Don't let anyone tell you that the Allies were in the war for anything but narrow self-interest. If they do, they're lying to you and probably to themselves.
Yeah.
If you like citations, by all means hit me up in my DMs. I'll happily send you a list. How many do you want? That ties into, there's a great man view of history in this film that I really don't like. And the reason I don't like it is because it's the dominant narrative of the Second World War.
I see what you're getting at, but once again, we're at a point where we disagree in our reading
Let
of
me
this
finish
film.
my statement first.
Okay.
It's always fun when Ring and I disagree.
Yeah.
So, there's a line. The sniper says, "Get me and this rifle within a mile or less of Adolf Hitler. Pack your bags, folks. War's over. We're going home."
Yeah.
The war didn't end cleanly with Hitler eating lead. I need. This is something we, especially the younger generations who don't remember and who weren't around for it. There was a genuine fear that the Nazis were going to come back. That Hitler was not the last of them.
Yeah.
That Himmler or, that other Nazis were going to pop up. That's why there's so many American comic book heroes who fight Nazis and secret Nazi organizations that somehow survived and conspiracies.
Yeah.
Because that was a genuine fear. There was no guarantee that Hitler was going to, Hitler was going to surrender or blow himself away, but B, that Hitler being taken out of commission would mean the end of the war. And this is a really important point that's really important to modern day. Because there is another war going on where the media and the commentators have taken a great man view of that war.
Yeah.
You need to understand that taking out the leader of a country or of an army does not, in most cases, end that war. Because there will be a chain of command. There will be contingencies in place. There will be people ready to step up and carry on. So unless you wipe them all out, this is why there was Operation Valkyrie. Was it Operation Valkyrie? Was it Operation?
Yeah, where they took Hitler's castle.
No, that's not the one I mean.
Well,
this is
that was
French
Valkyrie, and that was actually another 101st operation.
Yeah. This is why the French resistance, the White Rose Society, the German resistance, the Polish resistance, when they targeted Hitler, they never targeted him on his own. There was never a question of just blow Hitler away. It was always suitcase bomb at a big meeting or take out a row of cars or something, because they knew you can't just take out Hitler because there are people there to take his place. And you have to wipe out the entire upper echelon if you want to behead something like that.
Hail Hydra, cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place.
Exactly. And this is a really important lesson to carry. If you learn anything from this stream, take that piece of information and carry it with you. Because we are seeing the great man view of history play out in modern day with current wars that are going on.
Yeah.
And I'm deliberately not saying any names because I don't want this stream to get cut, but you all know what I'm talking about. Blowing one lunatic away doesn't guarantee that there aren't 2 lunatics ready to carry on.
Yeah.
Megalomaniac, lunatic, psychopath, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Evil person. I'd rather say evil person than any of those other things because those are on mental health conditions. But don't ever think you can take one person out and win. Because there's always someone in the background.
If Trump ends up behind bars, there's still DeSantis.
Yeah. When Trump was president, there was still Pence.
Yeah.
It's the same, and they know this, and only an idiot would put themselves in the position of not having someone ready to take the reins.
Yeah.
And frankly, the only reason the war ended with Hitler blowing himself away was because Hitler blew himself away because the Allies were in Berlin.
Yeah.
Like, those two things correlated. And the Allies being in Berlin caused Hitler to blow himself away. But if they hadn't been there and he'd just blown himself away, someone else would have taken over.
Yeah.
That would have happened. The reason the Nazis surrendered is because the Allies had already broken their lines. Not because Hitler blew himself away. That was almost incidental at that point. He was either going to blow himself away or he was going to see a hangman's noose. He blew himself away. That was it.
Yeah.
So please, if you're going to take a lesson from this stream, take that one. There are no single linchpins in organizations like that.
Yeah. Now, that being said, putting that view in that character's mouth, I would argue it's a subversion of the myth of the great man of history.
In that character's mouth?
Yes.
In the sniper's mouth?
Yeah, in the sniper's mouth. Because he's that particular, character is very much established as a hyper oorah, I am a badass, I am the angel of death, God's instrument of vengeance of earth mindset type of person.
Yeah, he's on a mission from God. He's
like, it's put in the mouth of a character who obviously has that kind of delusion.
Yeah, it obviously has a few screws loose.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a regular religious guy.
Yeah,
the other guys in this are religious without thinking God is calling them to kill people.
Yeah, if you put it, like, if those lines were put, like, in the sergeant's mouth or Miller's mouth, that would have been supporting the myth. Putting it in the putting those lines in the mouth of the sniper who recites a special prayer as he's sniping people and believes he is God's instrument of war, to quote him, is a subtle subversion of that self-same myth.
Counterpoint, that guy talks like most of the American civilians who would have watched this movie in 1998.
And that is not a problem with the movie, that is a problem with the reception.
Yes, it is, but it's still a valid counterpoint.
Yeah.
Because you can't discuss a movie without also being aware of its reception.
Counterpoint. Once again, we are veering into America is bad with mythic literalism.
Yes. Also, counterpoint. The movie is not responsible for its reception.
Yes.
Did I just counter my own counterpoint?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. But talking about that guy and his delusion, there's a lot of ironic little twists in this movie.
Yeah.
Not least in the way most of the characters die.
Yeah.
Like, they all go down in, like, all the named characters at least, they go down in like the most thematically inappropriate way possible, to the extent that it's ridiculous and it's bordering on laughable. Like, the medic goes down by asking to be overdosed. The sniper goes down by having his bell tower destroyed. The
sergeant pushes through and just collapses off screen.
Yeah. the new kid goes down protecting a kid. It's like
Yeah.
it's
And
ridiculous.
the translator survives, but shoots the German that he saved.
Yeah. So loses his humanity on the way. It's very reminiscent of the Joker in
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket.
Once again, this is a Vietnam movie, or this is a World War II movie done as a Vietnam movie.
Yeah. And it falls more into the time scale of Vietnam movies.
Yeah.
And you know the leader goes down right at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just this movie goes out of its way to point out that life is meaningless and everybody dies.
Yeah, especially in war.
But then it gives all of its named characters really thematic deaths.
Yeah.
And that's just the Iliad right there. That's just the Iliad. That's an epic in the tradition of the Iliad right there.
Yeah.
Is that comment? This idea of, yes, life is meaningless, but these lives have to have some kind of circularity.
Yeah.
And some greater irony or depth to them.
Yeah.
And it is a darker irony that's being employed.
And ultimately, what ends up giving their life meaning is the fact that they laid it down to save Private Ryan.
Do you hear that? It's the distant strains of the American national anthem, as you said those words in that particular tone. Yeah, there's a tone we take on when we discuss these things that it's real. Like, we've been trained to do that by movies like this, and that's that one. Okay.
So a brief tangent, since you mentioned the flag.
Yes, yes.
So the movie, bookends on a shot of sunlight streaming through an American flag, waving proudly in the wind. And it's like, one, I really, really like that effect, but in order to get that effect, the flag is obviously so threadbare that it should have been burned as per the flag code.
Yeah. I laughed when you picked up on that because I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
In this one specific instance of this movie's historical inaccuracies utterly irrelevant to the plot and therefore not worth commenting on, I feel like this is one of those times, because what that flag is representing in that moment, an old man worn down visiting the grave and everything else, and that circular and the age of the character and everything else that is sort of
like
fed to you through that image of the threadbare flag.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
No,
I don't know if you'll allow it. You're the veteran, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, I mean, heck, I'd eat, like, I even allow it on the grounds of it's a really good effect.
Yeah.
But I do, like, I had to point it out because there seems to be a correlation between, and it's really ironic that I'm mentioning this on, while discussing a movie that is so brutal to the American mythos surrounding World War II. in most ways, but not in others. That there's a correlation between um, what I'm going to call flag shagging, but in what I mean as overt displays of nationalism.
Oh, you mean a US flag and a Confederate flag for sale in a gas station under a photograph of Lincoln?
uh, and and blatant disregard for what respect for the flag actually is, as per the flag code.
It's the difference between
Yeah.
the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
The spirit of the law says you respect the flag because you respect what it represents.
Yeah.
The spirit of the law says these men bled to keep the stripes red, and they are the stars in the American pantheon, and they are the heroes of the American mythos. And therefore, you respect this thing. They laid down their lives, and this is the banner they laid down their lives under, and you will respect that.
Yeah.
Magic skycloth go burr.
Yeah.
But, and I say but, there is a specific subculture that shall remain nameless because I don't want to be shot. Especially as I plan on going to the US at some point. That shall remain nameless. That doesn't grasp the gravitas of what the flag is supposed to represent.
Yeah.
And the way I put it is this: the same people. Okay, the Venn diagram of people who say to veterans, "Thank you for your service," and then bitch about how much money the VA gets, and the people who think they can wear the flag on their chest and then pretend like they're Americans is a fucking circle.
Or the Venn diagram of people who bitched at Colin Kaepernick for disrespecting the flag while, eating their 4th of July barbecue on paper flag plates.
Yes, it's a circle.
And like I said, I like, especially with the added, thematic context of an old worn,
an old
worn
soldier and an old worn flag.
Yeah.
He knows the truth of what the flag represents, and the flag is worn and tattered.
So I completely support the use of a such a threadbare flag in private, even just for the aesthetic, because it's a really good aesthetic. I just hope they burned it afterwards.
Yeah, they probably did. I will say as well, there is also the undercurrent of city on the hill, shining beacon of light coming through the flag.
Yeah.
Through the flag to the land.
Yeah.
You can talk about heaven and
religious or more aptly through the flag to the viewer.
Yeah. And there's another trope, another symbology trope that comes up here. That's really fucking interesting.
Yeah.
A film came out in 1997. So obviously it's not this one. A film came out in 1997 where an older man was doing a job where his life was at risk. He was actively fighting to protect his country and fighting a good fight, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Whose abiding memory of his wife, and who he talked about his wife regarding, was of her cutting rose bushes. What film am I talking about? In the film, he actively hacks into a satellite to watch her pruning the rose bushes. Agent K in Men in Black.
Oh.
That's not an accident. You see it a lot in American films. There's this thing of, it seems to be cinematic shorthand in American films, of the stay-at-home wife who prunes the rose bushes.
Yeah.
And it's usually shown by fresh cut flowers on the dinner table or something. And it's traditional Americana. It's feeding into peace, tranquility, love, because it's always red roses.
Yeah.
Romantic love, but also it binds it up in this concept of sort of it's always bound up in the man's sense of duty and his sense of obligation to his country and also to his wife, and how that plays out. And it's always an image he treasures of his wife, of her growing flowers. Usually in the context of the man being a killer. The wife creates, the man destroys.
Yeah.
It's a duality that cinema likes to play with.
Yeah.
It's a duality that needs to stay in the 90s. But it is a duality that cinema does like to play with, and that has its place.
Yeah.
This is why men give women red roses, because it's blood red, but it's also the colour of passion and love. And blood and war and violence and love and passion. Look, there's a reason the goddess of love in ancient Greek started the Trojan War, okay?
Yes.
The words.
Paris be horny.
Yeah. It's a thing, and it's an interesting observation to make. And now I've pointed it out to you. Every movie you watch, you will not be able to unsee it. You're welcome. Most of my other observations, aside from, I've got two observations that are a bit deeper and a couple of amusing ones. So we'll do the amusing ones, and then we'll end on the heavy ones.
It seems fitting.
Yeah. So I want to talk about one of the things, again, not going to linger on this because, as I said, this movie's historical inaccuracies are barely there and not worth mentioning. But First Army passwords, Thunder, Flash, all the way through this movie, it's the wrong way around.
Yeah.
Thunder and Flash were chosen because there's no TH sound in German. The German would give away their accent. That's what. But in this movie, they call Thunder, the other person recalls Flash. Under First Army password rules for D-Day, Thunder and Flash, it was the other way around. You call Flash, the guy round the corner calls Thunder. And you can hear his accent. And that word changed every day. And soldiers were expected to memorize the list and what day each one was. I've got the list here in front of me. On June 7th, it was the challenge was thirsty and the password was victory. Don't know why. That stayed the same until June 10th, when it became weapon and throat. Again, notice how all the passwords have got sounds Germans will struggle with.
Yeah.
On June 13th, which is the day the bridge goes down, the challenge word is wool and the password is rabbit. Don't know why. Can Germans not pronounce it? I don't know. I assume there's something about pronouncing rabbit with a German accent.
Or perhaps it is about pronouncing wool in a German accent.
No, because wool is the challenge word. And it's that way until June 15th. And they were expected to memorize these and know what to use on what day. And frankly, someone responding with the wrong word on the, different day's word on a certain day was grounds to shoot them.
Yeah.
Because that's a German who's found out the code word. That's not an American soldier who's being drilled on this and should have had it memorized. But as you said, Americans don't read their own manuals.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I just wanted to. It's an interesting bit of trivia, and
and you can't really expect.
How would you have explained that on screen to your audience without getting bogged down in exposition?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, you can't really expect someone to follow that in the an American audience to follow that in this story.
I love how you clarified an American audience. I think in this one instance, I will grant you, I don't think you'd expect any movie-going audience to follow that.
Yeah.
That's that one. There's a comment passed. There's a great comment passed of, when we were shipping out from camp in England, I was offered a packet of cigarettes, but I turned them down and said, I don't smoke.
Yeah.
Everyone smokes in a war zone, dude. Take them. It's like a prison. Take them.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you can use them for trade.
Yeah, he says as he's smoking a cigarette.
Yes, he says while sparking up. For the record, if I'm ever in a war zone, my whole thing of quitting smoking, nah.
Yeah.
Just nah. At that point, it's like smoking kills, but also I'm in a war zone.
Yeah.
I'll tell the bombs, they can't get me. The cigarettes have got first dibs. That was an amusing. That was a joke for the smokers in the audience, and in 1998, that's a lot of the audience.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's true. There's another thing, right? That's that one. Okay, there's two other quippy comments I want to point out. When they're listening to the record player, the gramophone.
Yeah.
And he's translating the song.
Yeah.
And the response to the song. Okay, there's two quips there that are really funny.
Yeah.
First of all, inexplicably, I'm finding myself strangely aroused by you. Which... That's the power of music, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, he did actually have some gravitas reciting those words.
Also, that is the power of the U.S. Of being in the military. You there is a lot of homoeroticism, whether ironic or not, in the military.
It's not ironic. They've been trying to tell us for 2,500 years that it's ironic, but we've known since the Band of Thieves that it's not ironic. Don't worry, we know. We know, believe it. We know. You may join the army straight, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in boot camp there must be you must have had like a day on like homoeroticism or something. Because...
I have two words for you, and hold on. I'm going to put up a trigger warning for these two words. Gay chicken.
Oh my god! I genuinely thought that was an urban legend.
No.
Oh my god.
I didn't play, but I have seen it played.
Okay, now I want to know how far it went before someone... No, I don't want to know actually. Holy shit, my fanfic brain just exploded. Yeah, look, high stress environment, no women around. People are going to start looking mighty friendly.
Yeah.
you do what you got to do to get through it. You survive. There's plenty of, gay for pay, gay like spaghetti. There's this thing that spaghetti guys. The trope exists for a reason.
Yeah.
It's no problem with it whatsoever. Just the jokes are they're funny and they're worth pointing out because they're funny.
Yeah.
And now that I know that they're truer than I assumed they were, and that they're not just an urban legend, which will lead me on to one of a little aside I want to make. Makes them even funnier. I will point out this whole view of America and what America looks like classic Americana, the farmhouse, how white everyone's teeth are.
Should I explain what gay chicken is?
I would say make them Google it, but I don't want to be responsible for them being traumatized. Let me finish my comment and then you can explain gay chicken.
Yeah.
Because we will need something to laugh at after that because
yeah,
traumatized straight laughter in the distance. But I genuinely didn't realize that's what America looked like flags everywhere, Americana, all that. I genuinely, and you'll remember when I came to the US for the first time.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how much like the movies it looked because I genuinely thought that was a look that was sort of contrived by Hollywood. Because I didn't think anywhere could look that in sepia camera filter.
Yeah.
It's like there are parts of America that literally have. It's like you look out around there and it's like a sepia filter in front of your eyes. It's so weird. It's just it's got a sense of not history because I know people with things in the back of their freezer older than America, but
nostalgia,
yeah, and it's this sense of an area, especially like the farmhouse where they grew up in Iowa, an area that plunked itself down, decided this is what it was going to look like, and then just never changed and never wanted to and was okay with that. It's like walking into an old person's house. Like you're going to see like a black and white TV and everything's going to be beige and wood. It's just, it's got a vibe. It's such a vibe. But yeah, now you can explain gay chicken.
Yeah. So for those of you who are blissfully unaware what gay chicken is, so first off, there's a very stupid car game called Chicken, where you drive at each other and the one who turns away loses. Or if you don't, or if neither one of you turns away, you both lose because you're both dead.
It's Bulldog's Charge for the Brits. It's kind of like that, running at someone full pelt and just who's going to jump out the way first.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Now, in the military, there's a variation of that called gay chicken, where you basically start doing subtly homoerotic things to each other and ramping it up and ramping it up and ramping up and ramping it up until someone says no.
And how far have you seen it go?
I've seen someone's junk get grabbed.
I mean, that's tame. I was expecting worse.
No, like full on.
Yeah, grab them by the But there's a great Reddit post if you ever find it of I played gay chicken with this guy in the army we're getting married tomorrow, and I think we took it too far. Which is obviously a joke, but
yeah. There was a contractor that nobody dared challenging him because one, he was the kind of guy who wore a kilt, like a full-on Scottish kilt, and also two, he was a Marine, like he was ex-Marine. Yeah.
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 That'll do it. Also, just the homoeroticism and the Marines is there have been academic articles on this shit.
Yeah.
You can find them. But homoeroticism in the military, the Sacred Band of Thebes, Achilles and Patroclus. My tongue's not behaving today. I promise I'm sober. It goes back, and it's a thing. And you know what? Whatever you've got to do to get you through, you're in one of the worst situations a human being can be in.
Yeah.
You know, two guys in a foxhole. What happens in a foxhole stays in a foxhole. You know.
So what we're saying is there are no straights in a foxhole.
There are no straights in the army, full stop. I saw the demographics of your unit. Don't at me. Seriously, folks, I am not joking. At the time they were deployed, Ring was the token cis straight white guy in their unit.
Yeah.
Everyone
to be fair,
else
that was before I got
POC.
Yeah. To be fair, that was before I got hit upside the head by the Clue by 4.
Yeah, but to be fair, would you have come out with that? Actually, you'd have been all right coming out then, wouldn't you? I'm trying to remember. I think he'd have been all right coming out in the army at the time. Wait, no, hang on. Yeah, Obama in the White House. I mean, I wouldn't have recommended you come out in the army because we saw someone else do that and we saw how that went. But there was no, I don't think at the time there was an impediment to you actually serving while not straight and or cis. Anyway, moving on. While you all hunt for the brain bleach for that one, talking about brain, two things. First of all, that music that they were listening to.
Yeah.
He's right when he says any more of this music and the Germans will have to kill me.
Yeah.
I saw that and I messaged Ring and I was like, hey Ring, does the idiot music to slit your wrist to translate across?
The Army's
it's an interesting song.
Like the Army's two universally accepted coping mechanisms or non-chemical coping mechanisms.
Humor and gay chicken.
Well, I was going homoeroticism and gallows humor.
Yeah, that humor and gay chicken.
Yep. Sorry, did I disrail the train?
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, I'm choo-choo train's catching up.
Yeah.
My mouth goes faster than the choo-choo train.
Yeah.
It's just playing catch up. Give it a second. We are not going to. I've just realised the words that came out of my mouth. We are not going to make a Steamboat Willie comment at this point. Moving on. There's
but Betty Boop has great gams.
Fuck Hitler.
Yeah.
There's one thing I really want to point out. When Miller and Ryan are sat talking about his talking.
Yeah.
Miller takes a chair, puts it down, takes another chair, sits down, puts his feet on the other chair, and then leans back.
Yeah.
That man is not a teacher. That man has not taught in a school, because every teacher knows one kid who fell and cracked their head and died from leaning back on their chair like that. It made me laugh because he's supposed to be a teacher and he did the one thing I think is universal to teachers.
Or, he's been in long enough that he doesn't care anymore.
I mean, to be fair, he was one of the few characters who wears his helmet properly. You tell I've got to be in my bonnet about that. But speaking of Miller, going on to the slightly heavier topic, I want to talk about the trope of what you are in the dark. It appears a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
You get Capazio grabs the girl against the orders. Is it
Vin Diesel?
Vin Diesel grabs the girl. It's not that I can't pronounce the name, it's that I can't remember it. Vin Diesel grabs the girl. They let Steamboat Willie go the first time. They stop to take out the machine gun nest. The conversations in the church.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what you are in the dark going on here. And it's really interesting because all of these men are flawed. They're all traumatized. Yeah. None of them are the kind of person I'd want to be around for any length of time in civilian life in the way they behave in a war zone. Yeah. Like, you can see how they're going to have problems reintegrating back into civilian life. And yet, every one of them has a what you are in the dark moment.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they do it fairly well. Like, Miller talks down the sergeant from blowing one of the other guys away. Ryan could have absolutely said, okay, let's go. But no. And the line he comes out with, tell my mother I'm with the only brothers I've got left.
Yeah.
It's a very what you are in the dark moment. No one would have faulted him for saying, yep, let's go. I'm not putting my mother through that. But he made a decision. You've got the medic who... The medic's a weird one because he wears what he is in the dark on his sleeve. He's a medic. That's his job.
Yeah.
And he gets angry. Like the whole, we stop the bleeding. Bullet through the head. And then just 12 seconds of effing and blinding.
Yeah.
But even he chooses the way he goes out, and that's very indicative of what he's in. He doesn't want to hold them up. He knows he's a dead man. And he just wants it over quickly.
Yeah.
But he also doesn't want to die. And we see a lot of dying moments, and this thing of soldiers crying out for their mothers when they're dying.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is a thing historically. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And when you're that terrified, you lose all sense and you regress back to, I'm going to die. There's nothing left. I want my mum. I want my mother. Yeah. If you're in that, if you don't get the opportunity. And I think it's really important because it's indicative of, there's this concept in media, in military life, but also just in general, in religious life, in secular life, this idea of a good death.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth discussing, particularly as we pick this film for Armistice Day.
Yeah. In that no one really, like, except maybe Miller, no one really gets a good death.
None of them get a good death, and that's
Yeah.
the point. This film is very much embodies the thing of it's the Wilfred Owen, it's
Yeah.
that's a World War One poem, but even still, it's the old lie. It's a great
Yeah.
and glorious thing to die for your country.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's dirty and it's painful and it's gross and it's icky, and you'll probably piss yourself and cry for your mother. And there's no such thing as an honourable death in a war zone.
Yeah. And oh, I will say, Vin Diesel's death was probably one of the best sniper scenes I've seen in film. That
Yeah,
being said,
I
I
mean
haven't
that's up there with
seen.
Kubrick.
I mean, that being said, I haven't seen that many war films. So, but because
But
yeah, that is a sniper tactic: is get someone wound your first target, and
wait for the
then
others to break cover.
yep, and then shoot them as they try and get them back.
Yeah, which you've got to be some level of not quite right to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Like again, no, just there's some things that are just horrendous, and yeah, which
Well,
is
I mean, you know, in the opening, well, not the opening, but you know, right after they took the pillbox, you know, don't shoot them, let them burn.
yeah.
You know, both sides are fucked up.
Yeah. And I will point out that for the best part of 28,000 years or so,
Yeah,
no, 2,800, 2,500 years, 3,000
yeah,
years. I got my numbers really mixed up there. For the best part of 3,000 years, their snipers have had a reputation.
yeah,
Like, back to when snipers were archers. Like, in
yeah,
ancient Greece, being an archer, there was this thing with archers in ancient Greece were not viewed with the same respect as soldiers
yeah,
because they were away from the battle and they were considered sneaky and devious and underhand and untrustworthy and a little bit fucked in the head.
yeah,
Because, again, with the Iliad, Paris was an archer.
yeah.
That's a thing. Paris is
And
another guy
now
who
I'm
played Nat
thinking,
Helen.
like, now I'm thinking that we sometime we're gonna have to discuss Enemy at the Gates, because that is the quintessential sniper movie.
Is that the one with the Chinese man who plays music?
No, that's about the Russian sniper versus the German sniper at the siege of Stalingrad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we will at some point. But yeah, there's a very. I don't know how true it is because I don't know any snipers in real life.
yeah,
Um, but we assume from a civilian point of view, and I don't know if this translates to people in the military, we make a lot of assumptions about what kind of person you've got to be a successful sniper.
yeah,
A clue, not a hero movies get made about.
yeah, yeah. Unless your name is Chris Kyle.
Well, that's what I mean. The assumption by most civilians is that snipers are generally a little bit detached from reality, if not outright delusional.
Yeah,
Dangerous people with no grasp of the nuances of killing up close because they don't, and therefore no respect for life. This is the broad understanding, cultural understanding of what a sniper is.
Yeah.
Now, do I think there's any good just cause for that? I think it all boils down to this. It's a matter of respect, and it's about whether you respect human life or not.
Yeah.
Snipers are viewed as not respecting human life because they don't get in up close and personal.
Yeah.
This is why the Air Force is a little bit. There's an undercurrent of that when you talk about people in the Air Force. There's an undercurrent of that, with bombers and things.
Yeah.
And because generally snipers, Air Force, all the roles that don't necessarily require you to be up close and personal and in the blood and the dirt tend to be the roles that go to daddy's little rich boy. There's also there was an undercurrent of it when they were talking about what was it the Nintendo badge of they were
Oh
saying
yeah.
before long drones, people who man drones, well, you're so far away from the action you're never going to grasp what you've done.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of we grasp that war is hell and war is chaos and war is horrendous and you should never go to war.
Yeah.
But then we also simultaneously hold a set of beliefs that go back several thousand years of once you are in a war zone, the rules change. And the rules stop being about being a decent human being. And you become, there's almost this requirement to step up.
Yeah.
To be the hero that civilians want to see. Like to embody the propaganda.
Yeah. Or to put it in a more primal way, the lion is attacking, you're expected to fight.
Yeah. And it's you're either it's this thing of people will say to soldiers or to people, they'll even say to people who've just got general trauma, they'll say, oh, you're so brave. But what's the socially acceptable answer to that question? To that comment? Like if someone says to you, oh, you're so brave, you survived years of abuse, or you're so brave you fought in a war. The only socially acceptable answer to you're so brave I couldn't do that is, but my other option was to lay down and die. And it goes back to the Spartan idea of with your shield but on it.
Yeah. With your shield around. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that thing of it's a requirement that honestly, as a species, we should have outgrown it like 1,500 years ago at least.
Yeah.
It's the 21st century. Why are we still expecting people to lay down their lives for high-handed ideals that are actually propaganda?
We don't necessarily use them on the battlefield anymore, but we're still marching in phalanxes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, yeah, but that being said, and I kind of want to do a separate movie or a separate stream with you about this because the idea kind of grabbed onto me. But I'll give you a teaser. It's like every time we've met an enemy that completely decimated us by not using a phalanx, how have we characterized them? Savage, barbarous combat gods.
Yeah. Or as sneaky underground rats who took us out and didn't come, and cowards who wouldn't face us on a field of battle.
Yeah.
Which again, it's just, I understand in a pre-Christian ancient society where warring factions are trying to get the next bit. Why there's that need for, okay, but if we have to fight, I need to know you will stand and fight.
Yeah.
But there's just no need for it in modern civilian life.
Yeah.
And in countries where it's a volunteer army, I can see why the idea sticks.
Yeah.
But I don't like how it's bled out of military circles into civilian life.
Yeah.
Because it feeds into bootstrap theory, it feeds into this sense of being a temporary embarrassed millionaire, or of not everyone's got to be strong, and it even feeds into concepts like like motivation porn and problems that brings up. Everyone's got to be strong and has got to be an inspiration, as if surviving's not enough.
Yeah, though that being said, that being said, there's debate of whether, how big the air quotes are around the word voluntary, especially when you take class into consideration with it.
Yeah, no, the massive air quotes around the word voluntary there.
Yeah.
But in a broadly voluntary military, i.e. no one's knocking on your door and dragging you out of bed and putting you on a bus to basic.
Yeah.
I.e. you're not going to go to prison if you don't join the army.
Yeah.
In a broadly voluntary, and again, that was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. I understand why it works in the military, because if you join a volunteer army and you're not the kind of person who can stand and fight in that situation, you shouldn't have joined.
Yeah.
End of discussion. This is why Upham should not have been in that situation. That poor bloke, no. The minute they knew the Germans were coming and they were moving to defend that bridge, Miller should have put him on a motorbike and sent him back, or made him hide away somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, they were short-handed, but that guy did more harm than good being present in that battle. He was more of a hindrance than a help, to the extent that they'd have been better off without him being involved at all.
Yeah.
And that kind of person is a liability on a battlefield. And that's fine. Most of us are liabilities on a battlefield. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'll be brave with a gun at my head.
That being said, once again, there's another World War II myth where, all the, everyone who, all the Americans who fought in the war were, gung ho about protecting freedom and liberty. And World War II had a draft.
Exactly.
And Upham was probably drafted.
Yeah, most of them probably were.
And they probably knew that Upham wasn't fit for combat. Why they stuck him in the rear with the gears, seeing as how he also had valuable language skills.
Yes, I mean he's obviously upper middle class.
Yeah.
He's a skinny thing with no fighting experience who speaks 2 languages.
Yeah.
On top of English. This is not a working class farm boy here.
Yeah.
And there is a class dynamic between Upham and the others as well. There's a bit of a class dynamic there if you look at it.
Yeah.
But the reason I talk about this is because I want to come on to my next thing, which is discussing Mellish's death.
Okay.
And this is going to need a trigger warning.
Yeah, I'm getting it ready.
Mellish's death. So he's the Jewish character. He's in the room. The German comes in. There's a struggle. And he ends up on his back with the bayonet blade in his chest. And he starts to... And he's... I can't quite tell whether he's begging for his life or not. He seems to be. But there is still a violence about...
Yeah.
There is this sense of he's still fighting as the blade goes in. Like, he's still fighting until he stops. But the way the scene's shot and the way it's put together and the struggle and the way he's on his back and then the way the German who sort of leans into him, sort of hushes him and tries to settle him down. I'm just going to flat out say it.
Yeah.
That's a rape analogy right there. That's a rape scene by another name.
And, given it's, an SS officer doing it to the Jewish member of the unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably a wider allegory going on there.
Yes, most definitely. There's also the and the reason I bring it up on the tail end of talking about there's no such thing as an honourable death is because AFAB people, and I'm sure there's AFAB people in the chat who will agree with me on this, we're taught from a young age, or at least I was, better to be killed than to be raped. If a man tries to rape you, die first. It's better that he kills you than he rapes you.
Yeah.
And that's, first of all, it's fuck free. Okay. While you live, you have hope. You can survive. You can regrow. You can grow back from your trauma. There is hope. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
Second of all, it insinuates again, in the same way this idea of an honourable death does with the male characters, that there are fates worse than death. That there are dishonourable deaths. That there are deaths that are not good.
Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, we're all going to be eaten by worms. Or we're going to go up in flames.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a good death. The one thing you know for certain, death is the end. Whether there's something else beyond or not, death is the end of this life.
Yeah.
That we know. And death isn't just the death of a person, it's the death of possibility, it's the death of potential, it's the death of hope. And I will say this because having been, and Ring knows this, in a situation where I've had to fight for quote unquote my honour, because that's how it's pitched to women. We're told if a man tries to rape you, you must fight for your honour. Which, what century are we living in?
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of, problems bound up in commentary like that. The idea that it's somehow worse to be violated than it is to be outright killed. Like being killed isn't a violation in and of itself.
Yeah.
Is a problem. Because then you create a culture, a victim mentality that says there's no coming back from this. You are forever broken, forever scarred, forever sullied.
Yeah.
And if anyone's ever sat through Christian or Catholic sex education, you it's that culture. It's abstinence only.
Yeah.
But so your life isn't worth as much to you as your. And I am. Well, I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm glad I've grown out of it. There was a time when I subscribed to that idea. Well, I
Yeah.
would have gladly had a man stick a knife in me or put a bullet in me before I let him do anything sexual to me. Or I would have hoped I would have.
Yeah.
Because there's this thing of people think that your honor, whatever honor is, and honor is different in different cultures. And there's an entire lecture on honor and duty and all these other concepts that this film plays with.
Yeah.
But the idea that your honor is more important than your life goes back again to with your shield or on it, son.
Ours is not to question why. Ours is what to do and die.
The fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
But it's this thing of you'll be remembered as a hero. You'll leave a legacy. But I think there is something fundamentally wrong with a culture that lords as heroes people put into a situation where they had no choice and were killed,
Yeah.
and suggests that people who have been through some of the most horrendous things imaginable but survived and grown and gone on to do other things and brought good into the world after those things is somehow not on a par. And it's really, that's just something that's fundamentally broken in our culture and has been for 3,500 years, and I ain't going to fix it on a Sunday afternoon on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's worth bearing in mind when you talk about honourable death, going down swinging, a good death, your death meaning something. Death don't mean shit. Death means your heart stopped. Death means you're dead.
Yep.
What matters is your life and what you did with your life. And we do have this tendency to focus on death. And that's some of this film I think gets right really well is death and life is cheap in this film.
Yeah.
Like, it's really cheap. And it hits you right from the start of he's talking to the guy, he turns away, he turns back, and the guy's face has been blown off. What does he do? Reach over him and grab the radio. And then he shows more emotion that the radio's broken than he does that the guy was dead.
Yeah.
And life is cheap, especially in war. Life is cheap. But in peacetime, I don't think that's a mentality to be emulating.
Yeah.
And that's a message I think that this film gets across without beating you over the head with it, but it does get the old cogs working for you to come to that conclusion.
Which which is the perfect lead-in to how, ironically, um, just a mere 3 years later, America dragged the rest of the Western world into 2 decades plus of near constant war.
Yeah.
And actually, next week we are going to discuss that part of the response to that by discussing Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and then Spider-Man 2 the week after.
Mm-hmm. Neither of which I've seen, so I can't add a creepy comment at this point, but it should be good. we have a problem with valuing all the wrong things. We value
Yeah.
a good death when we should value a good life. We value, trinkets instead of people. We spend too much time thinking about the mission and not too much time about the people on it. And that's an analogy for life. We spend way too much time aiming for the next pay rise, the next promotion, the next car, the next this, the next that. When
Though,
last did you hug the people you love?
that being said, you said, we spend too much time thinking about having a good, death rather than a good life. And some of the last lines of the movie are, "I lived a good life. Did I earn it?"
Yeah, yeah. Tell me I lived a good life. Tell me I earned it.
Yeah. "Tell me I'm a
And
good
that,
man."
yeah. And that's a question I think that's not only designed to hit you in the heartstrings. That's a question I think, and Spielberg does this a lot because he did it in Schindler's List as well. That's a question that is posed to the audience.
Yeah.
Millions of people in history have died to get our society to where it is today, and will continue to die, fighting wars for whatever fuckery reason they can come up with. Sometimes justified, sometimes not, depends on what you call justified.
Yeah.
I make no further comment on that because I have issues with it. Believe it or not, I'm a political pacifist. I don't like war. Um, but that's why I wanted to do this one today, because
Yeah.
have we earned it? All those millions of people, so many people just on D-Day alone.
Yeah.
But Second World War, First World War, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan,
I mean, hell, look at, like,
and
I
that's just
mean,
last
it
century.
is much more impactful if you're there, but just look at the pictures of the U.S. Army cemetery in Normandy.
Mm.
Just rows upon rows of graves, and those are all people who died in that operation.
Yeah, and that's just one day of fighting.
Yeah.
Or a week of fighting. That wasn't even the rest of the war.
Yeah.
When you look at, if you visit, there's certain concentration camps you can visit in Europe, political concentration camps, not death camps, where what they've done is outside, they've put headstones down for all the victims. And these headstones, they're on the grass outside the place as you go up towards the driveway. And they go, you see the headstones before you see the wall of the building because it's so far away.
Yeah.
Because there's so many of them. And to fit them all in, they had to go that far out.
Yeah.
And, and it's, think about the people who, whether they knew what they were fighting for or not, who contributed towards an attempt at a lasting peace. First World War, they called it the war to end all wars.
Yeah.
Second World War, never again, lest we forget. Iraq, no more blood for oil, we said.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, we've got to stop with the pithy quotes and actually do something about this shit. And actually start stepping up and earning it. Because right now, we're not earning it. And that's a question I think this film asked in 1998. And that's a question that's going to be relevant in 2388.
Yeah.
And it's going to stay relevant, and it should stay relevant. Because if we stop trying to earn it, we backslide, and history is rhythms and cycles, and history rhymes. It doesn't
Yeah.
repeat, but it does rhyme. And we've seen the last 5-10 years of that in America and the UK. We're on at the moment now. We're in a moment in history where these things could very well happen again. To an extent, they are happening again, just to different people. Yeah, look up what's happening to Muslims in China. Look up the Rwanda genocide of 1993. Look up, hell, just go read about Iraq and Afghanistan instead of watching what's fed to you on the local news.
Yeah.
Look at Palestine. Look at there's so many countries. Look at the Kurds. Look, and we have a duty to earn what's gone before, but also to make sure we don't keep paying the price. And we bind up our fallen soldiers, our military personnel. They become almost messianic figures, as in Christ-like figures. They become the Lamb of God. They become the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, or to quote Gordon Lightfoot, see the soldier with his gun who must be dead to be admired.
Yeah. And it's a crying shame that in 2022, over 100 years after the end of the First World War, we haven't learned the lesson. We have to hope, I still hold out hope that we will learn the lesson eventually. Either that or we'll just run out of ways of killing each other.
Yeah.
Like, one of those two things is going to happen. But if there's one thing I believe, and there's one thing you can rely on, it's human ingenuity when we're trying to kill each other. So I wouldn't bet on that ending anytime soon. But this film pitches a lot of philosophical, moral, and ethical questions at you, and lets you chew them over for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. But if all you do is watch this film and then walk away, you've missed the point of the film.
Yeah.
This is a film that should stay with you. And I don't mean gory retellings or rememberings of a man holding his own intestines on a beach while he screams for his mother. I don't mean that. I mean, it should make you think, and it should make you ask, have I earned it? What can I do to earn it?
Yeah.
Because it's not about them giving. They were drafted, whatever, the way we earn it is by making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that's what will make it worthwhile. And for me, that's why it really pisses me off when I see rhetoric from, again, a certain kind of American who is all gung-ho and, oh, America won the war for Europe, and America came in to defeat Hitler and free the Jews. And look, it's a nice bedtime story for a child. Tell a child a nice bedtime story, but you're an adult.
Or to quote from Shakespeare, it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pretty story we tell ourselves because the horror of war is horrible and we don't want to think about it. But it's one of those things where Sam's got a point. Yeah, you leave the service alive. If you really care about dead soldiers, if you're really a patriot, if you give a shit, look after your veterans. Look after your traumatized. Educate your kids so their only option isn't the army or the dole, or the army or homelessness.
Yeah.
Get your economy sorted. Look after your people from the ground up. Use diplomacy properly. Don't go to war over every fucking thing. Don't elect people who want to impress daddy by digging up oil in a foreign country.
Or, don't vote for people who, worship veterans with their lips while voting against giving the VA more the ability to help more with their actions.
Yeah, that. Exactly that. Don't pay lip service. And that's what this film's asking us to do. It's asking us to stop paying lip service, stop hanging a flag, and actually get off our asses and do something and earn it.
Yeah.
And that's a message that is important today and will stay important. And I think that, for me, is why it really annoys me when I see war propagandized.
Yeah.
Because if you are fundamentally, if you believe in humanity and decency and just good, and if you believe that, certain things shouldn't happen in life, war should be one of those things. There should never be. There's no such thing as a just war. And I say this as a civilian, but also as a historian who's looked at this. I promise you, I have studied over 3,500 years of history, and I have not yet found a contemporary source that has ever had a good reason to go to war. They deluded themselves into thinking they did. They went back afterwards and said, "Oh, we did it because of this," when actually they did it because of that. But this was a just war because it resulted in this. There's no such thing as a just war. There's only a failure of diplomacy and a failure to find an alternative. There's a great quote, and I can't remember who it is. It might be Churchill, it might be someone else. And it's, war doesn't decide who's right. It just decides who's left.
Yeah.
War does not decide anything. All war does, the only reason to go to war is if you think you can spare more lives than the enemy. Because that's all war is at the end of the day. It's a game of one-upmanship. This is how many people I've got to feed into a meat grinder.
Or if war has already come to you.
No, because if war's already come to you, okay, that means that it's already started and that calculation's already been made. Some bean counter has sat down and looked at it and said, this many lives are expendable. I have an opinion. I want a thing. There's a problem here, and I'm willing to waste this many lives to prove it. Because there's never a war for the difference between right and wrong. Look, if America really wanted to spread democracy in the world, okay, they would not be only invading countries that are oil rich or other mineral rich.
Yeah.
If Britain wanted to spread civilization in the world when it had an empire, it wouldn't have had an empire.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a just war. There's only a poor excuse for war after the fact.
I have a slight disagreement.
Go on.
The only kind of war that can approach something appearing to be a just war is a war of self-defense in which you are you are not the invader. I.e., look at example Ukraine.
Okay, the problem with a war in self-defense is, though, right?
Yeah.
You still have to roll that dice on how many lives am I willing to throw at this.
Yeah.
Why is there not an alternative? Why did we get to the point of Putin putting soldiers into Ukraine? Why were he and Zelensky not sat at a table thrashing this shit out? Because someone's ego was too big for their dick. That's what goes on.
Yeah.
Okay? If people left their egos at the door and actually came to the table with a view to making peace and had even a shred of common decency between them, there'd be no need for any wars. There would be no need for any wars because it would never get to that point. And yes, I'm an idealist. I'm a bleeding heart liberal lefty. But, I understand self-defense. And I'll never slam anyone for acting in self-defense. But remember when you're making that omelette, you've still got to crack a few eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've still got to compromise your principles and your common decency and your sense of right and wrong. And for me, I'm just no. No. There are certain things that sometimes you just got to stand up and say no. This not in my name. No. And for me, there are very few situations in which a war is justified, if any. I cannot think of a historical situation where a war is justified, particularly if you're the aggressive force. When you're the defensive force, I think going to war defensively is not going to war.
Yeah.
Standing up and saying we will not be killed is not going to war. It's self-defense. Yeah?
Yeah.
Going to war is going to war. That's not the same thing. It's resistance. And there is a difference between going to war and resistance. There is a difference between being a guerrilla force of locals fighting off the invading oppressive army.
Yeah.
Insert whatever two countries you like into that scenario. And there have been several throughout history.
And there have been very much several just for the past few decades.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Carry on, I'm counting.
Yeah.
There've been a lot in the last century.
Yeah.
And standing up and saying no is not the same as going to war.
Yeah.
A, because usually when you stand up and say no, you're doing it, A, to protect yourself, but B, you don't generally conscript people to a resistance. They join of their own free will. And that's the difference. The difference is wars. If the people in your army or on your side don't know what they're fighting for, who they're fighting for, or who they're fighting against, you're an army, you're not a resistance.
Yeah.
And that I have a problem with, because if you're going to die in someone else's war, you at least should have the right to know what you're dying for.
Yeah.
Like, whether it means something or not, you should have the right to know what you're dying for. Am I dying because the emperor had a whim? Am I dying because that landholder needs his crop? That landholder's workers have rebelled, and his crop's going to go to waste if someone doesn't go in and sort that out?
Yeah.
Or am I dying because someone wants a particular piece of land? Like, it's I don't like war.
Or to
I really
borrow a
don't.
phrase from last week's episode, if we don't know what you'll stand for, what will we know what will you fall for?
Exactly, and you should know what you're standing for, especially when you're called to stand up and fight for it.
Yeah.
But again, even that, it's all bound up in honourable death, and this. We have a cult mentality around a good death.
Yeah.
We do, as a culture, we do. In the English-speaking world, I can't speak for other cultures, I'm not part of them. But we have this cult mentality around death of, if I die a certain way, or if I die doing something that's deemed heroic, that will be a good death, and it'll be a good thing. But let me tell you something. There's not a widow, mother, child in history who's lost a family member in a war zone and has been comforted by the fact that they had an honourable death.
Yeah.
They're still dead.
Yeah.
And anyone who tells you otherwise is just, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. Because if there's one thing we know about the Spartans, is that they were knee-deep in propaganda and they were well brainwashed into believing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. They also weren't that great a military force, but that's a comment for another time. It's... What's the saying? War is hell? No,
yeah.
War is war and hell is hell.
And of the two, war is worse.
Yeah.
From the great philosopher Hawkeye Pierce.
Yeah. Look,
well,
if there's one thing we know on Media Musings, it's that deep philosophical insights can come from anywhere.
Yeah. And I think that brings us to a close.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, obviously next week we are discussing Spider-Man, and the week after that we are discussing Spider-Man 2 in something of a mini double feature about the superheroes and the American reaction to 9/11, because if you can't talk about American cinema post 9/11 without talking about Spider-Man.
America likes to refight its greatest losses on the screen. It's all propaganda. We'll get into it next week.
Well, yeah, and especially since Spider-Man was one of the first big blockbusters to come out after 9/11. It released it.
Yeah.
Spider-Man 1 released in 2002.
Okay.
Like there was footage that had to be, or there were trailers for the movie that had to be removed from syndication because it involved the two towers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. America and its superhero complex next week, folks.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what we did this week, just different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But yeah, America and its superhero complex.
Yep. And after we're done with Spider-Man, I'm kind of excited because we're finally talking about one of my favorite movies. But since
you're talking about it, I'm buying out that week.
Yeah. Since Noodle is going to be at a convention, I get to talk about the Iron Giant.
Yeah, I love you, but not enough to sit through that movie. Like, I'd kill and die for you. I'll lay down my life for you. I'll not sit through the Iron Giant.
You do anything for love,
my line.
But you won't do that.
I won't do that. This is my line. Yeah.
So With that, go ahead and give your tagline.
Take care. Be good. If you can't be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.